You may already know, but last summer I made a video ranking all of my freshman engineering classes here at UT. Turns out, I didn't drop out in the last year, and I actually have more classes that I'm going to rank. I'm also going to be re-ranking my previous classes because I have a new perspective after spending another year here on campus, here in college. Just like last time, I'm going to be ranking my classes based on difficulty and enjoyment. I've now taken 7 total engineering classes. I have also taken other STEM-related courses such as physics and multiple math classes. To get started, here's a list of all the classes I've taken the last 2 years as an electrical and computer engineering student here at UT. Just a disclaimer that all the rankings done in this video are opinion-based and also based on professor and semester that the class has taken, because a lot of times coursework changes. So if you pull up to UT as an ECE major and you take one of these classes and you come to the realization that I was just lying, I wasn't lying, I promise. To sum this up, I'm not a course supervisor, and if you are registering for any classes, don't take my word for it. It's not worth it. The first set of rankings that I'm going to be doing is going through all my classes and ranking them in terms of difficulty. If you're more interested in how fun a class is or how cool a class is, you can go to this timestamp. Hopefully this is the right one. This is me before editing. As you can see here, this is my ranking diagram. I made it myself on Canva. I hope you like it. I think it's pretty. For difficulty, I'm ranking it from the range of I wish to bruh. Here on the right are my 7 classes that I'm going to be ranking. We can go ahead and get started with Introduction to Circuits. Now, Introduction to Circuits holds a cozy place in my heart because it was the most eye-opening class I've ever taken, ever. I took Introduction to Circuits when I first got to college, and it was easily the most challenging class I've ever taken up to that point in my life. Common points of interest were Ohm's law, Kirchhoff's law, and other methods of analyzing a circuit. It's been well over a year, so I'm not currently sure what the exact scope was for the class, but it was challenging. Now, with all that being said, I think I'm going to rank Introduction to Circuits at the hard tier, because while it was very difficult, many factors outside of class played into how difficult it was, including just adapting to a new environment of being on a college campus rather than at home. And it's easy to look back and say a class was easier than it was, but after gaining, as I previously said, a new perspective in this previous year of taking upper level courses, I will definitely leave Introduction to Circuits at the hard tier. Now, Introduction to Computing, I will say, was much easier than Introduction to Circuits. It went over the very basics of digital logic, and I can even remember, I think on the first exam I got 100. It was not a very difficult class, but you did have to pay attention, because past the first exam, it went over a little bit more complex digital logic, and even got to the point where we're going over the data path for a mini computer. Very interesting. I really enjoyed the course. I'll go over that a little bit later, but it wasn't too difficult, so I'm actually going to put it at a not too bad, because it wasn't too bad. Now, Introduction to Embedded Systems, this was a great class. It was difficult. I would say it's probably sitting at hard as well for difficulty. So I'm going to go ahead and drag it over there. This went over basic programming. We got started in C. This was a sister class with Software Design Implementation 1. So in both classes, we were learning C and C++ and implementing it in different ways in both the courses. The most challenging part to Introduction to Embedded Systems is that it went over a lot of coursework in the period of the class, but it wasn't super overwhelming. They did a lot of the starter code for us, and as I said, it was really enjoyable, and that always makes classes a little bit easier. The difference in Introduction to Embedded Systems and the Software Design and Implementation course is that in Embedded Systems, we were deploying software onto a microcontroller, whereas in the Software Design and Implementation course, while it was also fun, was just purely on the computer. Now, this Software Design and Implementation course was also very challenging. I hate to just keep putting stuff in the hard category because, of course, engineering classes are hard, but this class was hard. Not too much to say on the software design course, except it was mainly focusing on data structures and memory, which were 2 new concepts at the time. So there was a large learning curve, but it was good. It was fun, and it was code. Now moving on to circuit analysis. Circuit analysis was not a very hard course. It piggybacked on what Introduction to Circuits introduced. The most complicated topic that we went over in circuit analysis was Laplace transforms, and all that does is it takes a time domain function and moves it into the frequency domain when dealing with alternating current. Very interesting coursework. A lot of it was second order differentials, which isn't that interesting. I don't know why I just put those 2 in the same sentence, but it's pretty repetitive, pretty pattern based, and so it's not too challenging, but it can be interesting. I'm going to move that into the pretty chill, which is probably the only class of these that's going to be in pretty chill, I will say. Down to the last 2. I forgot to mention that circuit analysis I took my sophomore year fall semester. These next 2 I took in the spring, this previous semester that I just finished a week or 2 ago. Starting with digital logic. Digital logic was challenging, but it's hard to compare to these other courses. Because where these other courses are challenging is in the fact that the concepts are genuinely complex and very hard to wrap my head around sometimes. Digital logic, the entire class makes so much sense, but then you go to take the exam and it's like you're trying to solve a puzzle like a jigsaw puzzle every time you go to the exam. And if you've done a jigsaw puzzle before, you know that having previous experience with jigsaw puzzles only gets you so far in solving a new one. And that's how every one of these exams felt. I did manage to get an A. It was barely, I won't lie. Because of that, I'm going to put digital logic design into the hard category as well. There seems to be a pattern in engineering coursework being challenging, which I find very interesting. We're on to the last class, which is Real-Time Operating Systems Laboratory. This, I want to say before I give it the difficulty that I'm going to give it, was probably the favorite class I'll ever take, ever, as a student. As the name suggests, we learn about operating systems that have real-time capabilities, which means they're able to meet deadlines in real time. I'm probably not explaining that perfectly, but that's what it is. There's a lot of volume to the coursework, and we go over a lot of different topics. We went over like scheduling for threads and processes, file systems, and by the end of it, we were even going over networks, and then finally a autonomous car using some sort of control algorithm based on sensor inputs. In fact, I just released a video not too long ago, so if you're seeing this and you're interested or you're curious, go check it out. I'll probably put the card like up there for you to click on. But although this class was very interesting, it doesn't take away from the fact that it was the hardest class I've taken in my college career. There were weeks where I spent 20 plus hours on the single lab, and this was usually in the span of 2 days. We weren't procrastinating. There was just a lot that we had to take into account going into labs and other responsibilities that me and my partner had to take care of. This is going to go into the bruh category because I can't count the number of nights where I came home and literally was just like, bro, what is this? Like, what did I just do today? Because some of the labs were really just that. It would be hundreds of lines of code, and your single issue that's causing your lab not to be finished is a single line somewhere. The exams were also very difficult. I low-key choked the final pretty bad. Don't want to talk about it, but I am going to just rank it at a bruh. And there you have it. That is my difficulty ranking for my 7 engineering classes I've taken in these last 2 years at college. We can now move on to ranking them in terms of enjoyment, because the most important thing is fun and happiness and to smile every day. So let's move on to that. As you can see, it's the same style list. It just says enjoyment on the top. We have the rankings going in range from why am I here to almost Prime Fortnite. I would put Prime Fortnite, but let's be honest. Nothing can be compared to Prime Fortnite. We can start again with Introduction to Circuits. It'll be nice on this time around because I wanted to explain all these classes. I just gave a brief introduction to them in the previous round of rankings. Introduction to Circuits, I'm going to put it at cool, I think, because it was cool. It was a very interesting class, and a lot of it was like little puzzles. It almost made me go into the hardware side of ECE. Thank God that I didn't, because software is just so much cooler, and you can do robots and stuff. Introduction to Circuits is going to go in the cool category. Introduction to Computing, I think is what the class is called. Why do I keep forgetting that one? See, this one's tricky because I really enjoyed this class, but I'm setting a bar when you know what? Intro to Circuits needs to go down one because I think cool is just too high. Like, yes, it was interesting, but my heart isn't in Introduction to Circuits. It's not. Introduction to Computing was better. I enjoyed it more. So I'm going to put that in the cool. Moving on to Introduction to Embedded Systems. This class was also really cool. This is going to go right there next to cool. My only issue with Introduction to Embedded Systems, it's a big issue. My issue with Introduction to Embedded Systems is the class wasn't a great learning experience. Like, yes, you learned how to code if you haven't done that before, and you learn how to do it in a embedded environment. But the coding I learned more in my software design class. The Introduction to Embedded Systems class just consisted of labs that were almost already done for you. So I think it was just hard to have a good learning environment when all the labs had groundwork that, as a student, I didn't really understand at the time. Even now, most of it I don't understand, but I've learned to accept it. There's just a lot of driver code that can be very complex, and it just leads to more questions and less answers. So that was my biggest issue with Introduction to Embedded Systems. My heart is in embedded systems, but the class was just not, it was a not too shabby class. Now, software design implementation, that's going to go at cool because, I mean, it was pretty cool. It was just going over data structures, as I mentioned, which I find pretty interesting. And I thought, again, that coding's very puzzly, and that class just felt like a constant puzzle, and I can appreciate that. Now, circuit analysis, I don't want to be that guy, but it was just not very fun. Like, don't get me wrong, I like solving circuits, but I don't like solving circuits when it's actually slightly more difficult. In 302, the solving circuits really just felt like an algebra game. In circuit analysis, it felt like an algebra prison, and I had to do so much of it just to get like this random decimal that ended up maybe being the answer. I will say I had a great professor for this class. The only reason I didn't completely hate the class was because of the professor. Amazing professor. She taught very well, was very nice. but the class and the content itself, I just didn't enjoy very much. So I'm going to put that at the boring tier. Digital logic, I really enjoyed. It actually makes me want to go into Verilog design. I forgot to mention, in digital logic, it's not just digital logic. We also learn Verilog, and we push it onto an FPGA board. It was pretty cool, and it makes me in the future want to do some more coursework on this specific topic. So I'm going to put that in the cool category. Finally, we have real-time OS lab. That class was fire, I will say. It was almost Prime Fortnite. As I did mention that it made me very sad some days because it was very hard, very challenging. But at the end of the class, we got to make a robot car. And again, you should watch the previous video because I go over exactly how we did that in the previous video. So you should watch it. But it was a really cool class. I feel like I learned the most out of any one of my classes in that class specifically, mostly because in 319, Introduction to Embedded Systems, I didn't pay much attention, and it was low-key a very important prereq for it. So real-time OS hit me like a truck when we first got to the course, but it was really cool, very interesting, and that's why I'm ranking it at almost Prime Fortnite. Fortnite makes me want to play. I won't lie. I'm about to relapse on Fortnite. Okay, so that's all the engineering classes I have to rank today. Don't worry, in a year I will have plenty more because now that my many core classes are pretty much done, I get to focus purely on engineering, which has its pros and cons, I will say, but I'll have some cool classes to rank in a year's time. So looking forward to that. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or concerns in the comments about these classes, I'll be happy to answer those. Anyways, hope you have an amazing day, and as always, stay curious.